Hi, welcome friends. Time for another story today. Today we're going to be reading Curious George by H.A. Rey. I always thought the stories were kind of cute, but never really fond of monkeys. Maybe because they're like human toddlers and they're just so crazy. But they're awfully cute. And George is a curious, cute monkey. So here we go. This is George. He lived in Africa. He was very happy. But he had one fault. He was too curious. Yeah, George is pretty cute. One day, George saw a man. The man had a yellow hat, large yellow straw hat. The man saw George too. What a nice little monkey, he thought. I would like to take him home with me. The man put his hat on the ground, and of course, George was curious, and he came down from the tree to look at that large yellow hat. There's George, being curious. The hat had been on the man's head. George thought it would be nice to have it on his head. He picked it up and put it on, and the hat covered George's head, and he couldn't see. And the man picked him up quickly and popped him into a bag, and George was caught. Poor George, now he can't stay at his home. The man with the big yellow hat put George into a little boat, and a sailor rowed them both across the water to a large, big ship. George was sad, but he was still a little curious. He doesn't look sad to me. He looks curious. On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the bag, and George sat on a little stool, and the man said, George, I'm going to take you to a big zoo in the big city. You will like it there. Now run along and play and don't get into trouble. George promised to be good, but it isn't easy for little monkeys. But it is easy for little monkeys to forget. What is George going to do? Let's see. On the deck, he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. Finally, he had to try. It looked easy, but oh, what happened? What do you think George did? First this, and then this. Where is George? The sailors looked and looked, and at last they saw him struggling in the water, almost all tired out. So first this, then that, and now he's stuck in the water. Some monkeys can't even swim. Man overboard, the sailors cried as they threw him a lifebelt. George caught it and held on, and at last he was safe on board. Yeah, a mouthful of fish. Silly George. After that, George was more careful to be a good monkey, until at last the long trip was over, and George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and he and the man with the yellow hat walked off the ship onto shore, and on into the city, into the man's house. Look at George walking off the ship. Silly George. He's got his own bag and a book. After a good meal and a good pipe, George felt very tired. I don't know if monkeys should smoke pipes. Silly George. That seems like a silly thing to do. He crawled into bed and fell asleep at once. There's tired George in his little bag. The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo, and George watched him. He was fascinated. Then the man went away, and George was curious. He wanted to telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun! Who do you think George is calling? Ding-a-ling-a-ling! George had telephoned the fire station. The firemen rushed to the telephone. Hello, hello, they said. But there was no answer. Then they looked for the signal on the big map that showed where the telephone had come from. They didn't know it was George. They thought it was a real fire. Oh, look at them hurry. Hurrying to the rescue. Hurry, hurry, hurry. The firemen jumped on the fire truck and took out the hook and ladders. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Everybody on their way. Hurry, hurry, hurry. There they are, speeding to what they think is a fire. And the firemen rushed into the house and they opened the door. No fire, only a naughty little monkey. Catch him, they cried. George tried to run away, and he almost did, but he got caught in the telephone wire. no. And a thin wireman caught one arm and a fat fireman caught the other. You fooled the fire department, they said. We will have to shut you up where you can't do any more harm. And they took him away and shut him in prison. Poor George. Look at him. He looks all sad. Sad little George. George wanted to get out and he climbed up to the window to try the bars. Just then the watchman came in and he got on the wooden bed next to catch George. But the watchman was too big and heavy and the bed tipped up. Then the watchman fell over and quick as lightning George ran out through the open door. See, there, oh, boom, and there goes George. There goes George. He hurried through the building and out onto the roof, and then he was lucky to be a monkey. Out he walked onto the telephone wires. Quickly and quietly over the guard's head, George walked away and he was free. That's pretty brave. I wouldn't do that. That would make me afraid. Down in the street outside the prison wall stood a balloon man. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother and George watched. He was curious again. He felt he must have a bright red balloon and he reached over and tried to help himself, but there he is trying to get a red balloon. What do you think's going to happen to George now? Instead of one balloon, the whole bunch broke loose, and in an instant the wind whisked them all away, and with them went George, holding tight with both hands. Oh no, there goes George. Oh goodness sakes, now what's going to happen? Up, up he sailed, higher and higher, and the houses looked like toy houses, and the people like dolls. George was frightened, and he held on very tight. That does look very scary. Goodness, poor George. What are they going to do? How are they going to help George? At first, the wind blew in great gusts, and then it quieted, and finally it stopped blowing altogether. And George was very tired. Down, down he went, and bump, onto the top of a traffic light. Everyone was surprised. The traffic got all mixed up, and George didn't know what to do until he heard someone call, George! And he looked down and saw his friend, the man with the big yellow hat. Do you see his friend? Is that him? Yep, there he is. There's George's friend. George was very happy, and the man was happy too. George slid down the post, and the man with the big yellow hat put him under his arm. And then he paid the balloon man for all of the balloons. And George and the man climbed into the car. And at last, away they went. Where do you think they went to? The zoo! What a nice place for George to live. Look at there. He's with all of his animal friends and they all have balloons. There you go. That curious George got himself into all kinds of adventure. Maybe the next time you go to the zoo near you, you can look and see if you can see a George. And say, hey George. So thank you for joining me, and we'll have more stories tomorrow. If there's any you'd like to hear, drop in the comments the title and the author, and I'll look and see if I have them or if I can get it and read it to you. And until then, until we meet again, my friend, have a great day.